know Frank Madison is to understand what he stood for in his 79 years. A man who gave his all to his family, his tribe, and his country. Frank's story is as deeply personal as are the story poles he carved and treasured. He learned carving from Chief William Shelton. Throughout his life, he cared for the iconic poles. It is with the same grit, Frank was determined to make sure our tribal culture is kept alive. A respected Tulalip elder, the beloved husband and father of 10, always loved his Indian people. He is known as a carver, a historian, and storyteller. In a series of interviews, we hear his stories. It is a privilege to hear his words.
My name is Frank Freeman Madison, and I got my name from my father and my grandfather. My grandfather's name was Frank, and my father's name is Frank James Madison, and my name, Frank Freeman Madison. The Freeman was taken from a doctor, a very young doctor at the time, that delivered me, and his name was Dr. Freeman.
Oh.
Yes.
Your mother must have liked him a lot.
Yeah. But the thing is when I was ready to be born, my mother caught a cab in those days, in 1923, so you can imagine what kind of cabs they were, you know, and the cab driver, I couldn't wait, and she says, I got to get to the hospital right away. He says, well, I'll take you to the clinic. And so she took me to the clinic, or took her to the clinic. But where's the clinic? If you've been in Seattle, you have the triangle on Yeshler Way. Right in that triangle was City Hall. And on top of the City Hall was the city jail. And on top of the city jail was a clinic.
Oh, man.
And so for a long time, I used to tell everybody, well, I was born in jail, you know. Yeah, so he was just, what would you call it, internship or something of that sort.
Oh,
Yeah, he was this first time he got out of his internship, got into public life, you might say. And so he didn't know anything about delivering babies. So it was quite an experience for him. But I went back, you see, in the 70s, and went back and seen him, and he was old. And I met a daughter of his.
You were the first baby he ever delivered?
Yeah.
Oh, he probably remembers that.
So he, you know, once we brought it back to him, well, it all came back to him, you know. But he got so excited that he was calling the family, and everybody called friends on his phone.
Oh.
And they all come over and took a look at me.
Still around.
Yeah. And he didn't tell them my nationality or anything of that sort, you know. So this is how I first come into the world. I was born in 1923, February 22nd. And February 22nd is George Washington's birthday. And it's also my mother's birthday.
You were born on your mother's birthday?
So I was born on my mother's birthday.
Wow.
So there's another little something to add to the interest of my birth. Yeah, fascinating how things turn out that way.
Your mother was Delia, and she wasn't
My
Jimicum?
mother's name is Delia Jimicum. And she was in school when she was in school until she was 16, and she had to give up her schooling, which she didn't want to do. She wanted to stay in school and learn more because you know, it fascinated her. Some people are fascinated by learning, And it fascinated her, and she just wanted to stay in school and learn. And she didn't want to get married. But according to the old traditional ways, when she was 14, she was not sold, but according to our traditional ways, mated, I guess, by a promise. And every time you perform these promises, you give gifts. And the more upper class you are, the more the cost, you know. So my grandparents received, Lordy knows how many cows, I think about 15 cows, some pigs and chickens, and a boat, and there's quite a few other things that they received. And that was the agreement. So as soon as she was 16, she was to marry into the Heller family.
They got the gifts when she was 14?
When she was 14. So the transaction was all taking place then.
So then she was to marry when she was 16.
And when she was 16, then she was to marry Frank Hilaire.
Mm-hmm.
So
she didn't have much choice.
she didn't have, well, in a way, she could have just up and walked away. It was, you know, they really didn't force them to, but it was a matter of honor at stake here. So
if she was really unhappy with him, she could go back home then, but then would they have to give everything back if she went back home?
Well, if she had done that, then they would have had to give its equivalent back to them, yes. But what had happened, she was married a year, and then Frank died.
No.
Yeah, he died of tuberculosis, I believe. And
how old was he? Was he the same age or older?
no, he was in his 20s.
Oh.
Yeah, he was in his 20s, 21, 22, something of that sort. And then when he passed on, she, by tradition, is supposed to stay with the in-laws, see, so that she becomes like one of the family. But if she left, then she would be disowned by both families.
Huh. So
this is what she did. She went out, she just couldn't stand being with them, you know, because of their ways. And so she got a job driving the bus for Coy. Yeah, she drove the first bus from here to Eric. So it was the first bus.
Had she driven before that?
No.
Oh.
No. So she actually learned how to drive on that bus.
Huh.
I don't know whether it was a Model A or a Model T or whatever, but she drove it, you know.
Where did she live when she was doing
Well, I guess Coy gave her, he had those cabins down there, so she got one of the cabins. That's when Coy's was a big resort, you know.
Yeah.
He was always 100 years ahead of himself. Yeah.
And she and Frank Hilaire didn't have any children?
No, they were only together that 1 year. So she drove the bus almost that whole year, I believe. And they also picked up people in Marysville that wanted to go.
Oh, to Everett?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it was the first bus, actually the first bus between Marysville and Everett. And coming out here. So this tells us a lot of things that no one realizes, that we were much more advanced than the city of Marysville was. Marysville itself was actually created from our money, the money out here, because this was all timberland, and we had all loggers, and Marysville was just a logger town. So it built from there.
Well, even before that Comfort that was the founder, he had an Indian trading post or something, I think.
He had a trading post out here,
Yeah.
out on this side, rather than in Marysville itself.
Oh, it was out here.
Yeah, it was out here somewhere on the way. And then,
So as the founder, he was definitely founding it on Indian money.
yeah, right. Then when my grandparents, and those the original ones that come into the land grant, they got all stumpage, stumpage money, and they got several $100,000. So in that time, it was like owning or having millions in comparison to this time. So they were all rich out here. So my mother, after this episode of driving the bus and so forth, she had to leave the Hilairs, but at the same time, she had to give up her home. She couldn't go back to her mother and stepfather. Morris Joe is my stepfather, incidentally, step-grandfather. And she couldn't go back there and live because it was untraditional at the time.
Did she still have a good relationship with them, her parents, or?
Well, yes, they were always on a talking, and that they were mother and daughter and all that. She just couldn't go back, traditional-wise, So when she got enough money, she went to Seattle. And she got a job as a waitress in the little cafes. And I don't know how long she was there before she met my father, but that's where she met my dad. My father is Frank James Madison, as I mentioned before, and he's from Cake, Alaska. And he belongs, Sitka. That's just across from Sitka, across the bay. Be like going from here over to Camino. And in that family up there, we are of the Raven clan. They go by clans there. And
was he full blood or half?
He's a full blood. Well, there's some doubt about that. Like my aunt, like I was saying, my aunt used to call me French or Frenchman. So there's some French blood, and we've always wondered about Madison, whether it was Norwegian or English or Russian. So
you don't know where the Madison.
We don't know because this Madison bit is still a mystery as far as we're concerned. And
so probably he wasn't full blood, a little of something else.
No, he's a quarter, I think. We're sure. We think that he's a quarter. Yeah. And so anyway.
He was a quarter, or he was a quarter less than.
Quarter posset.
Oh, quarter white.
Yeah, yeah, Caucasian. And so he belongs to the Raven clan there. And in Cake, as we find out now, from the last powwow, Cake had a story where they were divided, and half of them had gone up into the Aragon, up in Alaska. I forget what that tribe is. And for a long time, they never did get back together until one young person and a young girl got together that were so deeply in love with each other that he would tell her that if he was ever to die, that he would tell everyone how beautiful that she was and that he would wait until eternity for her to show up. So this is what he did, and that's the story of it. So they made a double-headed raven. And that's the crest. That's our crest from up there.
What's the tribe name?
Yeah, they were part of the Tlingit tribe.
Oh,
yeah.
Tlingit.
So we Madisons had a lot to do with Tulalip. And I keep telling everybody that had a lot to do with Tulalip for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you said that your mother went to school. She went to school here, didn't
Tulalip,
she?
yes, yeah. You seen the picture where she's in the mandolin corps there?
Mandolin, yeah.
Yeah, with the mandolin, yeah.
How old was she when she started?
Well, that part I don't know, when she actually got into the school. But if she started like any of the other kids, well, they started pretty young, you know. Probably 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, thereabouts. My grandmother's name is Teresa Wicks. And at that time, she was married to, with my grandmother now, she was married 3 times. Anyway, her second marriage was to my grandfather, Martin Jimicum.
Oh, Libby? Was it Libby?
Yeah, Libby, yeah, she was a Libby, Ella Libby. And that was the first, my grandmother's first husband was a Libby. And then the second was Martin Jimicum. And the third was Morris Joe.
Okay, she was never married to a Hilaire then?
No,
Oh.
no. Hilaire's, my mother was married to the Hilaire's, or married into that family.
Jim Jimicum, now that was your
My
great-grandfather.
great-grandfather.
Do you know what his wife's name was?
No,
Oh.
no,
Or where she was from or anything?
no. I know, now Sarah Sheldon. She was an informer in these books I'm telling you about. She told a lot about, and they were asking her about who these people were in the Jimicum place.
Oh.
And lots of simps, you know, lots of simps. Big simps, you'd say. And over there, to-the-dee, she'd point. And so to break it down into language that Caucasians would understand, she'd say, chiefs, lots of chiefs, over there, to-the-dee.
Well, was she from that area too?
No, but she knew about it because she'd go up and visit a lot of times, you know.
Oh.
Yeah, Sarah, she was what would you say, upper class in her own right. Yeah,
Do you know where her family was from?
around this area. There's
From this
Sheldons are Snohomish, aren't they? Sheldons. I got to emphasize that, Sheldon, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were prominent people, well respected. So. When my father brought me here, my mother and him were separated, and she let him take me to visit. And what he had done, he believed the thing to make a man is to put you in boarding school, because that's where he went. So when he had taken me for this visit, he brought me down here, and he dumped me off. So this lady that he was with, they took off for Oregon or someplace. And my mother never knew where I was at. So while I'm here, almost this whole year, the newspapers came out and did a write-up on the school. And the school, the Tulalip school, is down below where all the houses are built down there. And Harold and I, Slow Joe or Sleepy Sam, whatever you want to call him, Harold Joseph, we were picked to have our pictures taken.
Oh.
So him and I had our pictures taken together in front of the schoolhouse. And that was in one of the pictorial Sunday papers. I don't know whether it's Seattle Times or Tacoma Times. I don't know whether I was 6 or 7. Or maybe I was even 8. I'm not really certain. But I think I was young because when he let me off, I did a lot of crying. So I must have been, you know, in the crying age yet. He dumped me off, And I hadn't even got settled into the dormitory yet, where the boys were, and dinner was served. So they took me down to the dining hall. That's the same dining hall. And Mr. Garcia, he has this little triangle, you know, and little bar to ring it, you know, and he'd clang that and you had to sit down. You clang that, you had to pray, you know, and clang that, and then you could eat. So he's ringing this thing, and I'm standing up there with him, tears in my eyes, you know, and all that. And so he hits me on the head, and he says, "Be quiet now." Boing.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. So he got everybody quiet, ringing this triangle, quiet, quiet. And this is Frank Madison right here. And oh, there's Joe. I'm talking about my cousin, Joe Junkum, you know.
Oh.
There's Joe there. And I was going to run to him, you know. And bang, he hits me on the head with this triangle stick again. Ooh. He said, "Stay here." So I stood there and I'm waving to Joe, and he hit me again. "Be quiet." So I turned around, I was looking at him, and at the same time the kitchen door swung open. And here's Muna, my aunt. You know, she was small. She's only a year older than I am. And she had this great big dishpan standing there looking. Ah, there's Muna. And the same thing, boing. So I had 3 or 4 little lumps on top of my head with that there triangle, you know.
So you had some cousins there.
Yeah, oh yeah. So I felt better.
Well, did you have any brothers and sisters?
Well, I have Frances, Etta Frances. She's the oldest one now, and I had a brother, Georgie. That's Frances's real brother. And there's Darlene Loney, and Eddie Loney.
Etta and Georgie, they're Craig's?
They're Craig's, and Etta's, Darlene and Eddie are Loneys. And that's it, I guess. Craig's and Loneys.
Oh, your wife's name, what was her name?
Lois.
Lois.
Yeah.
And what was her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Esque.
Esque?
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
Esque.
Oh, where was she from?
Well, she was born in Michigan.
Oh, and she was an
Phelps.
Indian?
No, she wasn't from here. But she came out here during the war. They came out during the war. And although during the war, her and her mother worked in Boynes. She was old enough to work, so she worked for Boynes.
Oh, and how many children did you have altogether?
Did we have? Well, her and I, we have 10 children. 10.
10.
Yeah. 3 boys and 7 girls.
Wow.
I was there until 1932 when it closed. Yeah.
Do you remember any of the teachers?
Not the teachers. They were all postage, as we call them. And none of them, no native teachers. Mr. and Mrs. Garcia's the ones that they had were supervisors of the boys' dormitory, the boys' building. And they had full charge of us there, of the boys. And I never did know who took charge of the girls on the girls' building.
What kind of classes? What was your school day like?
Interesting. It's like going to the little red school way out in the desert or something of that sort. But we get up in the morning, we go down and march down and have we're all little soldiers. Mr. Garcia was in World War I. And so we was like going to an academy school. We all had to march down to breakfast in the morning. Then we'd march back up and brush our teeth and so forth. And we'd line up again And in single line, we'd go down to the school, which is on the far side of our medical building now, where our clinic is at, going towards Hermosa. And so every morning we get up and we go and we get an apple to go to school with. So they'd always pass us out, they'd give us that apple. And we'd march down in single file. When we got into the little school building, we'd go to each one to our own classroom. I remember the first grade teacher. She was a heavy-set person, not real heavy, one that carried herself very nicely for the weight that she had. And she was nice. And she really, truly, in her own heart, liked us all.
Was that unusual? Did you have, what other kind of teachers were there?
Well, the other teachers seemed to be more more aggressive, not assertive, but aggressive in their actions. You do this, you do that, I want this, I want that, in that form. And as I graduated, I got up to the third grade. And the last year, I guess in 1930, we had an epidemic of flu. We lost a lot of our young ones there. And I got sick that year too. But the whole boys and the girls, the whole upstairs where we all slept, was just full. Very few actually went through that epidemic without getting caught with the flu. And it was an exciting place for me. It was an exciting place. The grandmother, when we go home, she'd tell us stories. And she says, one day you're going to go out and get your power. And what's this power? I didn't understand this power. And she talked as if it was a being or something like. And he's going to come up to me and you'll welcome him when you see him. And so when I got back to school that year, I run away and I went deep into the woods, going back towards what? Towards going across the highway as it is now. So I went into the woods looking for this power, this Tmanwas. And I'm supposed to stay there, is all she said. I'd be staying there, waiting until he'd come, you know. So I went deep into the woods, as far as a little guy could go, climbed over big logs, went through the ferns, I couldn't see over them. And I found a tree that had fallen, and underneath this tree, there was this empty space like. It was getting dark. So I gathered up all kinds of ferns and I put it in there. And I covered myself up with the ferns. So that evening when everybody was taking count, I couldn't answer. Has anybody seen Madison? Where's the Madison? Anybody see him? And so everybody ran out looking around for me. No one. And someone said, I seen him go up towards the woods. And so they got all the boys together, made one big line, and they went out and they hollered and hollered. Of course, I didn't hear them because I was already sleeping. But I don't think they got as far back where I was. And they went back. And I stayed out there all night by myself. I must have been only 5, 6, 7, or 8 or something like that. So the next morning, they all got up pretty early. the sun was already coming out. And they started out, only this time they kept going. And they're all in a single file, and they're all hollering. So they went right over me. And they had hollered, and I'd hear them. I wanted to answer them then, but I just let them go. And soon they come back. Nobody, couldn't find him, couldn't see him. And I just crawled out, and I walked right behind with them. And I come back clear to the school. Has anybody seen Madison? Nobody. The first platoon, no. Right on down to the smaller platoon. Nobody. Where is this Madison? I'm here. So I run out and I was waving. I was so happy that they was looking, or not looking necessarily looking for me, but because they are interested in me. Yeah. So Adam Williams, he was the commander. You go up and see Mr. Garcia right away. So I was all excited. I thought maybe Mr. Garcia was going to be glad to see me too. But it turned out a little different. So, where was you and why was you and so forth. And I had to peel down my breeches, and he had this little rubber hose, like a siphon hose, about big around as your finger. And he whacked my bottom with that there. So I remembered not to do that no more. But that was my first adventure to go out and get my twins, you know. Then when I was 15, well, I actually did it for real, or 14. And I went way back into the woods. And I stayed out there for a week and a half. And I had to bathe in this cold creek, you know. And my great-grand uncle, Tom Wicks, he was a doctor, in our terms, a doctor. And he's the one who taught me what to do and how to do it and what to expect and so forth. So when you get into that cold water, you don't freeze to death. So I got in there and I dug that there creek out so that it was big enough so it'd be, so I could fit in there and lay in there and sort of bathe around in it, you know, and sit and meditate. And this meditation is a real secret to being able to stand the cold, as cold as it was. So I stayed out there for a whole week and a half, and got what you might say is my twins. And we go back still further. I remember the days over here, right down here, that we loaded up to 2 boats. We had a large canoe, about 16 feet, 15, 16 foot long. That was all loaded up. And we had a 16-foot rowboat, and we loaded that up. We had tents and food, all the things we needed. And we rowed all the way up to the San Juan. It took us, week, a little more, to get up there. And we stopped at these various places on the beaches and set up camp. And we had a little short net, I know.
How many people were?
Well, there's my grandmother, Joe and I, Muna, Mary, and Rosalie. What is that, 4 kids, 5 kids? And Grandpa Joe and Teresa was, and myself, paddling up. So that was quite a job. But still, it was enjoyable. And when we got up to San Juan's, we fished off the shore. And to this day, I don't know what island we got onto, but we were on one of them. And we caught all kinds of fish. We pitched our tent, and we smoked the salmon. And I remember Grandma, she's filleting that fish and salmon right there. And we smoked them, and we had a bunch of jars that we brought along, and she canned a bunch of that fish right there. Yeah, I brought it back. But it wasn't so much getting the fish, although it was traditionally, because every fishing season we'd always go up there. Then we go, and then when the fish would come down here, all the people would come down here and fish out here, right over into Everett and everything else. And they did the same things long before we were doing what we did during the olden days when Everett was still just being built, just a few houses there. All the natives used to have their little camps along the beach there on the shore. And they had these little houses that they built out of cedar, and they'd smoke all their fish there. And a lot of these people, during the fishing season, when they'd come together like that, a lot of them were enemies, and a lot of them were having their little wars. But during the fishing season, they would stop, and they'd fish side by side a lot of times and catch their fish. Okay. I got some pictures here. Here's a picture. This is my Aunt Muna. She's 1 year older than I am. Okay. This is Loretta James's dad. And his name is Roy Henry Jr. And this is when he was married to Monticello Joe. Maury is their son, and he died of pneumonia. This is my uncle, Bill Jimicum. And this is his daughter, who passed on now too, my niece. And here we have Mary Jo, who's a sister to Mona. She's 1 year older than I am, Mona is, and Mary was 1 year younger than I am. And they both passed on now. And Uncle Bill is to Jimicum.
When was this picture taken about?
Oh my.
30s, 40s?
Oh my, that would have to be in early 40s, around 39 perhaps. This is me, and this is my grandmother.
Okay, this is about as close as I can get.
Yeah. On this photo, it shows the whale. Here's the whale here. And this is...
When that got cut off.
And this is the one that got cut off. Some occasions, this chainsaw and just cut it clear off.
Jesus.
And that is the first type of whale that I carved, and this was an eagle similar to this one here that I carved in Montana as young as I was. So that was my first professional carving. This is a pole that stood about 12 feet that I carved for Snohomish. And this is...
City of Snohomish?
Yeah, the city of Snohomish. This is my sister here standing in front of the pole. This is Adam Williams, our minister from the Church of God. Well, most of the outfits that were over there, and within this area, we become attached to various battalions or the Army or whatever you happened to be. And when he came in, we were attached to him. That meant that the whole army around was under his command. And he would come out and inspect the troops. And the reason they call him blood and guts, spit and polish and everything else like that is that our liner helmets, we had to have those all polished out. Anytime we used to come out and stand, we had to have our shoes shine and everything else. And here we are, we're in a combat zone and muddy and whatever else, you know. And here we had to shine our shoes and everything else. And it wasn't me that he was talking to, but he did have this soldier, and he just flew out the handle, and he uses these words, these vulgar words and so forth, use son of a bee and everything else like that, you know. And a few that he could invent himself, perhaps. But you could certainly hear him. Yeah. So I sat close to him. Yeah. He'd walk right in front of me.
Tell me a little bit about the pride that you have having served your country.
Oh, well, there is something, yes. It's, I guess the pride goes back like, it's like saying, and with our people long ago, if you were, warriors were separated from the rest, you know, the people were proud of them, and they always respected them a great deal. And when they accomplished something in the wars that they had, well, they come back feeling with this full prideness. And so I am a real down-to-earth warrior, and this pride comes with me all the time. Even though it's been a long time, I still have it.
And how do you try to give that back to your people?
There we have, there becomes a sort of a disciplined dedication, you might say, that you want to have your people in this preparation for life, or make life much better, you know, as it is, so that they can go ahead and follow through with their desires, etc.
And today's young people, would you encourage them to go into the service to serve their nation?
I would certainly encourage, if, for one thing, going into the service and going to your military basic training is one of the biggest helps there is to help a young person grow. It gives them a start to maturity.
And today, the aspect of education.
Yes, any form of education. If they could discipline themselves, or had this year military discipline to start with, even if it was during my time, it was only 3 months. If they had this 3 months, they would have this sort of inner discipline to make themselves to go ahead and see the value of the education. Oh, so many people don't know that the native people in the United States, and most of the reservations, and ours in particular, we have a great deal of people that's been in the service, and each one is in the service they served their time and did their country that good.
Many non-Indians don't understand the patriotic feelings of the Native Americans going off to fight for their country.
Right.
And your feelings, it was why did you go?
Yes, the same thing. It's my country. It was my country before, and it still is.
It is the smile that Frank carried with him wherever he went that lives forever. He was the epitome of a hard worker. His legacy is seen in the carving talent he passed on to his family. Stories of his work ethic are told with pride, the same pride he had doing everything he could to ensure the history of our people is kept alive.